You know, most people think quiet people are easier to control. They just assume silence means weakness, right? Passivity, fear. They think, oh, they're not dominating the conversation, so they must be submitting to it. But what if I told you they're completely wrong? Because in the world of dark psychology, quiet people are often the hardest people to manipulate. So let's dive into this explainer and break down exactly why that is. It's literally a manipulator's absolute nightmare. Why? Well, not because the quiet person speaks louder, but because they observe longer. While everyone else is just swept up in the noise, the drama, the fast-paced energy of a room, highly observant people are simply watching. They notice the subtle patterns, the little shifts in tone, the tiny micro-reactions that pretty much everyone else completely misses. They're absorbing data while everyone else is just exchanging words. And manipulators know something really dangerous happens the moment a quiet person starts seeing the hidden strings. I mean, the moment an observant person stops looking at the puppet and looks up at the strings, the game's over. Manipulators panic because they know they can only pull your strings if you literally don't know they're there. But when someone is silently tracking their every move, that illusion completely shatters.
Think of it kind of like a sleight of hand magic trick. A manipulator's entire system relies heavily on emotional distraction to bypass your perception. They need you focused on their left hand, a sudden argument, manufactured drama, so you don't see what the right hand is up to. Now, the goal here isn't to romanticize isolation or turn being quiet into some kind of superpower fantasy. This is purely about awareness. Quiet people tend to see through that distraction much faster, and understanding the system, that acts as your personal shield.
So let's get right into the first major reason narcissists fear quiet people. They delay trust. Just a simple, seemingly passive act of pausing. But honestly, it's highly disruptive to a manipulative agenda, because manipulators are on a strict schedule. They want to lock you in fast before you can actually figure out who they really are.
Most people barge at light speed, don't they? It's all about that emotional momentum. The attention, the validation, mirroring similar interests. It feels amazing, so they hit the gas. But observant people, they hit the brakes. They take a pause. They watch how you treat the waiter. They compare your actions today with the words you said yesterday. They are constantly scanning for any inconsistencies between what you claim and what you actually do.
There's a sort of golden rule in dark psychology. Manipulation works best when emotion moves faster than perception. If they can get you to feel strongly before you think clearly, they win. But by deliberately slowing that emotional process down, the quiet person forces the manipulator to keep their act up way longer than they're used to. And under that kind of intense scrutiny, the mask inevitably begins to slip long before any real bond actually forms. Okay, moving on to sign number 2. Silence creates pressure. Here's something most people don't even realize. Silence makes manipulators incredibly, almost physically uncomfortable. We've all felt the urge to fill an awkward silence, sure. But imagine your entire sense of power literally depended on getting the other person to speak. Why does it bother them so much? Because manipulators are basically data miners. They rely entirely on your feedback, your emotional reactions, your validation, your personal info. They constantly scan your responses to calculate their level of control. But quiet people reveal very little. And let's face it, human beings naturally fear what they cannot read. A narcissist is absolutely terrified of trying to navigate without a map. And that unreadability triggers a vicious panic cycle. To compensate for the dead air, the manipulator starts overcompensating. First, they start talking more, just trying to bait any sort of reaction. Then they start over-explaining, trying to justify their behavior before you've even asked about it. And then they slip. They make critical emotional errors and contradict themselves. The silence becomes intense psychological pressure. Not because the quiet person is trying to be intimidating, but simply because unreadability creates massive uncertainty. But there's one specific reason manipulators truly hate highly observant people. It's the ultimate anomaly. Eventually, they just stop reacting emotionally altogether. They go totally neutral. And wow, that completely breaks the system. Which brings us right to sign number 3. They don't provide instant emotional fuel. A manipulator's tactics are literally designed to provoke a response. But a quiet person, they just refuse to play ball. Narcissists survive on emotional leverage. You can see it right here. Anger, guilt, a desperate need for attention or fear. That is the fuel keeping their engine running. If you get angry and yell, they win. If you feel guilty and apologize, they win. But if you starve them of that instant reaction,
you cut off that emotional supply, they instantly start feeling powerless. It's like a car just completely sputtering out of gas on the highway.
Instead of lashing out and providing that fuel, quiet people use a totally internalized process. When they're provoked, they observe first, then they process, then they think. If they react at all, it's almost entirely internal. It's kind of like trying to hack into a computer that literally isn't connected to the Wi-Fi. The narcissist loses access to instant emotional control, and they just cannot dominate a system they can't emotionally access.
All right, sign number 4. They remember everything. And I'm not just talking about having a decent memory. We're talking about an incorruptible mental archive. Because observant people spend less time talking, they spend significantly more time categorizing their observations. They remember the patterns, the tiny contradictions, the subtle changes in behavior over months or even years. This mental archive is pretty much absolute kryptonite for gaslighting. Manipulators depend heavily on confusion. They rely on emotional intensity to make you forget the exact details of a situation, so you doubt your own sanity. But you really can't gaslight a human tape recorder, can you? Because the quiet person continuously archives the exact words that were actually said, the manipulator's reality distortion field just fails. Knowing their target remembers the actual truth makes manipulators very, very nervous. And finally, we arrive at the ultimate system failure. Sign number 5, and arguably the number 1 reason narcissists fear quiet people, they eventually walk away. And they do it silently.
There's no dramatic confrontation, no explosive screaming match in the driveway, no massive emotional text paragraphs explaining why they're hurt, because frankly, that would just provide more emotional fuel. Instead, it's a sudden, silent withdrawal. It starts with just a little physical distance, evolves into complete emotional detachment, and ends in total withdrawal, leaving the manipulator completely stunned. Manipulators absolutely hate this, because the fundamental rule of manipulation is that control requires access. You simply cannot manipulate someone you cannot reach. The exact second that quiet person emotionally and physically disconnects, the house of cards comes tumbling down. The system fully collapses. The illusion of power just evacuates.
Just look at what is lost in the blink of an eye. The narcissist instantly loses the audience. The emotional supply is cut off. The psychological leverage is completely worthless. All of it, just gone. And honestly, the absolute worst part for their fragile ego, because of the quiet person's silent nature, they usually never even saw it coming. They were playing checkers while the quiet person was quietly mastering chess.
So here's the real truth we need to take away from this explainer today. Quiet people are not passive, and they are definitely not blind. They are practically overloaded with information. They noticed far more than they ever say, and they process way more than they ever reveal. And once they understand the system they're actually inside, they become incredibly, almost impossibly difficult to manipulate. Which brings us to our final question. Can you see the strings now? Knowing exactly how this dark psychological game is played is really the only way to make sure you aren't just a pawn on someone else's board. Your quiet observation, it's not a weakness. It's literally your ultimate shield. So use it wisely, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next explainer.